Welcome, dear viewers. I would very much like to invite you to an extremely interesting conversation with Jirji Inkateo Vesely. Jirko, hello. Hello, I'm very happy to be here. You are an extremely clever person. Not only do you make such amazing things, but you have a Seraphin Center, where you have countless lectures, but mainly topics such as cosmic numerology, astrology, cards, just about anything. Now, where do we start? I confess that we had a conversation once before. It was several years ago. 3 years. Cosmic numerology. Yes, cosmic numerology. I really liked that interview. I was excited at the time, and I wondered how this person could manage all this. And now you have arrived with more new things. So I'm all sweaty about how we can even do it all. We will go all out. It will be about energy, because you really like working with energies, and you really try to get those energies into concrete things to serve people. People, humanity. So you have your say, how do we start? And where do we start? I guess, how are you? Is this a transformational time? I have the feeling that the transformation period has actually been going on forever, that something is always happening and people still feel that way. And that's one of the things I'd like to talk about. It's such a new topic that profiled for me in terms of my lectures, because I do workshops, lectures on working with dreams, numerology, symbols, working with consciousness, but for now, for the last year, a topic has been assembled into it, which I see that people react to it incredibly. And that topic of understanding or trying to understand what energy actually is, the physical energy, the one that manifests itself here in our gross matter. Because trying to understand where it comes from and what its rules are can lead to the fact that the person can actually practice it in everyday life. And I see that today there is a lot of wisdom available on the internet or on various electronic networks, but there are so many of them that on one hand it becomes too theoretical for a person and difficult to grasp for practical life. Some of the information literally even contradicts itself. So one has a problem with finding out, getting oriented, in which direction to go. Today we are somehow pushed by the ordinary life, or almost beaten by the reality of how it can actually be used. And that led me to talk about the nature of energy, because it's kind of a partly philosophical question, partly physical, some quantum physics, and so on. And a lot of people may not like the technical terms, but today I would like to take it here in a more civil, human way, so that we can get to something essential and those people can understand with a concrete example that really works and that they can include it in their lives for real. Because a lot of people know, read, realize in prehistory or in ancient times, there were some megalithic circles or megalithic structures, huge pyramids, and so on. The whole planet is littered with it, and somehow we all feel that it worked. We may not know exactly how it worked, but energetically it must have worked somehow. It is even known that, for example, the pyramids work somehow, because it is possible to find out that food spoils there later, or a Czech researcher found out that razors are sharpened there on their own, and so on. Some effects can be noticed, but it is more difficult for us to understand why this is so. A lot of people have some ideas that the pyramids must be like this, or poppy, and so on. Today I would like to talk about how we can think about those energies and how to practically use them in real life, in everyday life. And I have concrete examples of people whose energies cause them something, and I actually brought this with me as the strongest illustrative example, which is so strong that it actually works even in the defiance of the laws of physics. It doesn't have an explanation in terms of physical law, but that's exactly what I want to get at, because the essence of those energies goes beyond what physics today normally recognizes. That's why I included the word miracles in the title in our conversation, because the meaning of the word miracle. In Czech language, miracle is za zrak, something behind visible, invisible, hidden. We don't understand the principle on which it works. We don't know it, and that's why we might call it a miracle. So we will gradually get to the origin of that energy. Where does the physical gross material energy come from? And that is truly a hidden miracle. It's somewhere we can't grasp anymore. We can't fully understand it yet, but we can work towards it. So that would be my favorite topic to cover here today. It fascinates me how the two discs spin up here. Well, I hope we won't be flying away anytime soon, or that the camera will withstand it and the lens of the objective will not fall out, because it actually multiplies. This has his energy, and so on. It's wonderful how it multiplies. So let's get to the energies. I will ask you because you usually ask questions. People here answer. Try to answer me. Where do you think that the physical energy comes from? Let's say, for example, scientists have an idea that there was a Big Bang, so some particles started to form here. Today, we can observe that there is heat and ultraviolet radiation and photons and electrons. But where does the energy or the matter come from? So it's still here. And now it depends on whether we perceive it or not, and how we work with it or not. Actually, it is in us, all around us. I'll follow up with something interesting. And now, this year, I gave a lecture at a festival, and by coincidence, Professor Jan Rock, our well-known quantum physicist, also gave a lecture there. So I would like to take his words very seriously, because he was at CERN for 30 years. He had a huge capacity. He led research there. He participated in deciding what research would be done, and so on. He participated in the discovery of the Higgs boson, for example, one of the biggest discoveries in recent times. And when Professor Jan Rock gives lectures today for ordinary people, he basically tells them two main messages. The first message that they're trying to convey to these people is that for 30 years at CERN, they have been researching what is actually inside, in the matter, because even those quanta are made up of subparticles, but they have a short life. So they discovered there is nothing in that matter. That sounds crazy. There is nothing there. And secondly, and this is an even crazier message or realization, that what appears to be there is not reality, but the result of the observation itself. That is, a reflection. It's something that reacts to the observation and shows up that way. So we see here what we want to see? Maybe it's because we have different layers of consciousness. Or do we put the charge in there ourselves? From my point of view, the human being is multispectral. We have rational consciousness, subconsciousness, and superconsciousness. When we die, a completely different category of consciousness in the universe opens to us. Or the basic things. That's already a question. They are subject to programming. That means that, for example, a negative person puts his own into those energies, so it affects them and they can be directly programmed for it? Maybe not. A physical being who calls himself Seth, who spoke and wrote a book through Jane Roberts. So she says a lot of interesting things, and one of the interesting things about Jane Roberts, there is even such a book about it in Czech. So she says that when a person is in depression, or such a low, in quotes, vibration goes to him, so even the dimensions of the room she is actually in shrinks because the vibration goes down. And she says it's such a tiny difference that she won't measure it with a physical meter, but the tendency is there because the person is constantly influencing it. And perhaps the film Our Home is the best answer for me. In that film, you can clearly see that even though it does not have a body, even though it is a soul, depending on the mood of the consciousness of that soul, it creates such a reality around itself. So the moment he starts to get jealous, or the moment he just doesn't like that his wife has a new guy, that's when he finds himself back in some lower vibrations, and he needs to cleanse himself and wish that person that is, that love, and that moment will return again, because we simply co-create the environment around us in some form. So in what form do we collectively create space-time, or the physical entities here? That is the question. But in that CERN, when I go back to physics, the physicist actually says there is nothing there, and that is the result of an observation. So this is the first questioning of the matter, so that we stop understanding it as being unquestionable, that matter, because we are captives, we are prisoners of this spatio-temporal determination. The level of our consciousness is a prisoner of that spatio-temporal determination. There is some space, there is some passage of time. And I would like to actually start now by saying that the concept is not physical. And I can show it, for example, on the new trend of such advanced physicists who are already advanced, so advanced physicists that some propose that time can be canceled as a physical quantity. And that's because there is a lot of evidence that time is not physical in nature. Well, surprise, right? I will show. Physicists, when they want to define time, we cannot define it other than by the principle that we start observing some matter that we choose. Physicists have chosen a cesium atom, and according to what that cesium atom does, they count the number of something several times, and the number of something activity of that cesium atom is called 1 second. That is how a second is defined. According to the fact that some mass somehow moves, but what if all the matter around us started moving like this at once, twice as fast, for example? God came and said, guys, I'm going to mess with your heads. I'm going to double the speed. That means that mutual relations will not be preserved. So what are you going to do here in this new state? We count the same number of shakes and say this 1 second. Or it almost happens that time speeds up. But we are not able to know it. No, because it actually adapts exactly the speed at which we live. Yes, in other words, those modern physicists propose that time is a perceptual concept, not a physical reality. I was just giving a recent example. The Russians have developed a super accurate atomic clock. So accurate when, for example, the idea that these are clocks, that they are here in that space. So we all understand that gravity decreases as we move away from the center of the globe. So if the atomic clock rises by even just 1 centimeter, gravity, the force of gravity, will drop slightly. But the atomic clock can already record it, and its time runs differently. It runs differently here, and it runs differently here, because it is a different gravitational field, stronger, weaker. This is a physical demonstration of the fact that even the measured time simply depends on the surroundings, and that spared time is dependent on that consciousness as such. So, if we accept that time is something that is a result of perception, not a physical reality, but it is the result of a perception, then we have to ask what space is, because space is again defined by time. If you want to get from point A to point B in space, you need to cover some distance. It takes some time, and you need time to get from point A to point B. But when that time is the result of perception, then we correctly say time-space. They are inseparable entities. Then the perception also applies to the space, which makes it harder for us to understand how space can be the result of perception. And that time, it is still somehow possible that we understand that maybe someone perceives differently. We know that Einstein said that the universe is what the observer is. It depends on how fast we are moving, such as speed, etc. So we know that there is some relativity. There is no single truth. So the truth is a little different for everyone. And it totally applies to the space as well. So if time is the result of perception, then space is also the result of perception. And when there are brave people who can feel this or perceive that it could be so, then a complete blow will come. And that is that exactly the same must apply to matter, because matter is a reality in that space-time. It cannot be real, and what she is in can only be the result of consciousness. This means that even the play or matter is the result of that perception. That's why those Indians in South America didn't see those ships, because they had never seen them before in their lives until some South American Indian chief saw the waves from those ships, because he knew the waves. And the waves led him to believe that the parked ships were doing it, because the ships couldn't understand what it was, so they couldn't see it. That's exactly it. This is how we operate. So our consciousness equals that matter, right? If you had a different level of consciousness, we wouldn't perceive matter like that at all. Yes, I might say that we always want to interpret it through that experience, but our experience is against what exists. Here I might say such a funny moment when I was amused. I was watching Hyde Park on TV once, and it's hosted by a young man who studied technology because he likes to invite scientists there about physics and technology and so on. And he was invited there. I'm from Brno, so I was interested. He had a scientist from Brno invited there who works for NASA and works on the invisibility system, so it sounds terribly attractive. So he interviewed him there. And now he stopped in the middle of the conversation, and he was saying, wait a minute, it's like you're saying that if other beings were on a different basis of selection, they'd be walking right through that room here at that table like this, and we wouldn't even know it? And he looked at him like he was crazy and said, I'm talking about it all the time here. And he staggered and didn't know how to continue. At the same time, he is a classical physicist who simply works at the level of some basic knowledge of physics. So for now, I'm talking about something that doesn't really have any practical impact, because we know that the finger just won't go through with it, and that's it. And I want to talk about something that is actually behind the sight, that is a little different. But what is different is inserted here and can be used practically, because those people have some practical experience with it. So that's the revolutionary thing I'd like to say here. I remembered one incident. I had a teacher who could dematerialize, materialize, and she did that only in important moments. And so, as students, we wanted her to describe to us what was actually happening. And she said it was a simple law. She raises her vibration, and the vibration of her physical body so much that actually the body is no longer visible to our eyes. And she said, I still exist. I see myself. You do not see me because the 3D vision is not able to see us. She said, the higher my vibration, the higher my level of consciousness, the more I perceive your plasma. And when I raise my vibration so much, I perceive you as just energy. So we all realize that actually have some level of consciousness that is the level of a 3D physical reality. And so, it's all extremely interesting, isn't it? Energy that was quite visible to many people in those high vibration individuals. So is the energy that comes out of the spine actually Kundalini, and that is light. Those are the saints who have the halo. So this is the light that is already visible to those people. Both the Merkaba and the pyramids. This was a favorite matter of Hermes Trismegistus. That's your big favorite. Yes, the entire Hermetic text is amazing for tapping into genetic knowledge. There, for example, you can find an interview with Tate, where it is explained that how, when Polymandrus explained what is the essence of things and being, and how the first energies were created, it is absolutely famous, and I think that quantum physicists basically swallow those texts, and he tries to find in it the essence of the physical plane that he understands today. I'd probably start because I think you'll get what I'm saying. Let's try to consider the initial state of the beginning of everything, or the source of everything, whether all beings or any manifestations within that being is some source. Someone may call it God, someone the Creator, someone the cosmic consciousness. The nomenclature may be different, but for the moment, I will call it the source. So probably a lot of people can admit or feel that the source is not composed of matter. It is simply some kind of consciousness that has a huge, infinite capacity. In any case, we can consider the source as immaterial. The source is intangible. But this immaterial source is able to create such a system of perception that those individual observers who in some way came into being as beings on different levels have some observation conditions, and if in that immaterial source they manage to create such conditions through some system of barriers, filters or something, so that it's possible to create an environment where we understand it separately, that is, not everything, everywhere, and at once, and time actually runs chronologically there. But if we manage to cut it, like when Brahman cuts the mantras into 108 pieces, and those pieces then try to find their origin again, then the system of that separation is actually a necessary condition in order to create the conditions where it is possible to hide behind a barrier. Therefore, it is possible to lie, it is possible to steal, it is possible to murder. It is possible to do these low vibrational things because in that original source it is not possible when two angels meet. So they can't lie to each other. It's simply not possible. That principle won't allow it. It is not possible to hide behind some barriers, that is, to arrive at some other system of learning and growth. So this type of garden is created where there are filters, barriers, this separation. The play on that matter is used as if the finger does not pass through the table. It is already physical as a physical barrier. But basically, we could call the system of that division today as quantization, because the original Latin meaning of the word quantum is how much as a number. So when we cut something continuous into some number, we get a quantized environment. Within that quantized environment, those phenomena can no longer be continuous. They are simply quantized. And within that quantization, which is a necessary condition for this type of experience as material, gross material, subtle material, the quantized effects work and function there. In principle, however, they are still ensured, the interface between the immaterial and what we already call matter. So the prescription, the order, the plan on the source, which ensures that the quantized understanding is still not material, it can only create the quantized effects. What is the nature of the interface between the immaterial and the material world? This is actually the grail of knowledge for all beings. Because imagine here is the immaterial consciousness. Here is the interface. And here is the material consciousness, or the consciousness in matter that perceives the material one's effects. And you have a physical body, and you would like to manifest yourself in some form in the non-physical plane. Well, you need to open the gate here, because the form of dreams are exiting the body, and I don't know what. So, if you have a body, you may be very interested in how the interface works, because there is the key to getting inside, and vice versa. Imagine that the soul does not have a material body, but you want to chat in matter. Well, you're also interested in how it works, the gateway to that matter, because it's not just like that either. She actually interests absolutely everyone. So historically speaking, if we go back 5,000, 10,000 years, the information about this interface was the largest and most secret, and it is necessary. If I take this symbol specifically, the numerological symbol number 144, 144, which is not just a number. It is mainly the principle of 1, 4, opposite 4. That is the meaning of 144. So this number is one of the main key descriptions of the properties of the gate between the immaterial and material world. And the one who is actually about the gate, he knew something, automatically knew something about that number. The one who already knew it and somehow knew how to use it. So when he was alive, he had a manual created in case I accidentally died somewhere in battle, hunting, or wherever. So bury me this way, and in my tomb will be exactly like this, 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 because they wanted it on their own body, in their own tomb, simply because it's space where the soul after death has access to its grave, to its place of burial. If he doesn't leave, yes, of course. But he has the option at any time. He has the information at any time. So everything he knew about the interface between the immaterial and the material was written in that manual. Maybe Tutankhamun did it this way. The Mayan king did it like that, and so on. And they actually did it for themselves because they knew that this opening of that gate was useful for everyone in the next life. What knowledge is, what information is, and how the interface between non-matter and matter works. And that is exactly what I would like to quickly show here in abbreviated form, as well as in a flight around the world. The original meaning of the word sacred means powerful. Is powerful geometry. But what is geometry? If we imagine it for an example, a classic pyramid, that means it has a square base. It has a tip. So what exactly is the pyramid? Is it a thing? Is it an object? Or is it a form, a shape, a symbol? It doesn't have to be anything. It can be a mathematical notation with just one line, a formula, even if it's 4 equilateral triangles and 1 square base. It's no object, no thing. That is something that occurs as a thought in consciousness or awareness, or a set of information. And the set of information is not of a material nature. So actually, geometry is mathematics describing an area. That is geometry. And when we find out that there is a certain mathematics describing a certain area, then we find out that the mathematics describing sacred geometry is sacred mathematics, or powerful mathematics. And that's why we can't say much in real life anymore, because we kind of cut ourselves off from contact with living nature and living energy. We now perceive things mediated. So, for example, if I take the today's esoteric word Merkaba that everyone knows, so the Merkaba was a separate system. So this is, for example, the 3D printer that printed the Merkaba. Basically, they are 2 pyramids, but the triangular base here is the triangular base of one here and the triangular base of the other. One has the tip up, the other has the tip down. This is known as the concept of body, and we call it the Merkaba. Merkaba is basically composed of three words, mer-ka-ba, and translated into Czech, it means something like a vehicle for the soul, powered by light, energy. So this and there are rotations and so on. But basically, what is the shape? Two pyramids blended with one axis. But what pyramids? They have equilateral triangles, and there are four of them. That's a tetrahedron. So a tetrahedron tip up, four faces tip down. And it's interlaced with one axis, 1, 4, 4. So this is the epitome of 144. And this system, the Merkaba, is so incredibly creative that if I put it this way, you'll see a cross. And it's a cube. Cross, cross, cross. The very crosses. Actually, it is a cube with 6 crosses, and suddenly we come to the meaning of the cross, because you make the Merkaba with a cross. Isosceles, yes. This Merkaba has some properties, and now I will only talk about this one 4-sided pyramid. This means, for example, remove the bottom tip. Only the top tip will remain here. What is a pyramid with a triangular base that has equilateral triangles? It is the simplest 3-dimensional solid. This is such a brilliant discovery, both in history and today. Today there is a living genius. His name is Nassim Haramein. And this person, when he was young, 7 years old, it is said that even then he said that his life's task was to uncover the essence of space-time, what it actually consists of. He succeeded, and actually, the genius thing that came to him was that he wondered if it was true what physicists had imagined all along, that the basic structure of space-time is an infinite number of infinitely small points. But a point in the imagination of those theoretical physicists is an infinitesimal sphere. They felt that the simplest thing in nature was a ball, and the point has no physical dimension. So an infinitesimal sphere. This is how they imagined. They call it the basic system, that is, an infinite number of points. And it was Nassim Haramein who thought it must be a ball, when actually the soap bubble makes a ball because there are energy bonds between the particles. But we are talking about something when matter has not yet come into being, and is yet come into being. So the ball must be there too, or the circle or the section, if the physical energy is not there yet. And it occurred to him that there was only one simpler form. It's a split ball. So you have a ball, and there is a similar shape, and that is an equilateral triangle. It has a smaller circumference than a circle, and is therefore simpler. And so he thought, what if the point of space-time is not a dimensionless sphere, but a dimensionless pyramid that has 4 walls? And he found out during those calculations, because he is a good theoretical physicist, that in terms of vector forces, it is not balanced in space. So it is not a perfect point in space-time, because certain mathematical demands are placed on it. Then it occurred to him that we are a duality world, and therefore we only have 2 charges, plus and minus. Rotation can only be right, left. That is why in our universe we see light, dark, left, right, and so on. So you thought, what if the pyramids with the triangular base or 4 walls are not one, but two, and they are actually of a dual nature. That means one points in one direction and one in the other, and they can even rotate in the opposite direction, etc. And they are combined into one body. And because all of a sudden this thought created what 10,000 years ago was called the vehicle for the soul, the Merkaba, so he said, "That's it, I discovered it." And he began to calculate whether this body could really meet all the conditions for a perfect point in space-time, and found that, unfortunately, it did not. Again, it is not balanced in space, which disappointed him. But he was not deterred, and found that if he now had 8 of those Merkabs here in space, he could snap them into one body, the 8 Merkabs. It will create what appears to be an enlarged Merkaba, but it will have equilateral triangles on it. There are 144 of them. That's the number. And this body, assembled from 8 Merkabs, already fulfills all the conditions for a perfect point of space-time, including the most demanding condition and the fact that it is perfectly fractal. This means that if you build this body as a kit, which is as basic as a Lego kit, the smallest brick, then you build anything from it, then if these 8 Merkabs click together would be the basic Lego brick, with which it makes up what we will then call the material world, the energies. So it fulfills the conditions that when you create anything, the basic information does not disappear anywhere, and you can always read it from the created thing. It has always been in my life since I was a child, or since there were computers. So I asked myself such a strange question. Infinite symbol? We have a binary code here. 1, 0. Why do all those memory cards and chip manufacturers use multiples of 8 and 64 kilobits, 128? That's all multiples of 8. Fractality. Fractality through consciousness. So what do we have as the main element to create? 4 walls tip up, 4 walls tip down. This means 2 different pyramids. That's the binary code. 1 or the other. 1 and vice versa. 0 and 1, for example. But how many little pyramids does it have that stick out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Joining tetrahedra binary automatically generates multiples of 8. If you continue to generate this principle on subconscious level, then you actually put 8 in those memory cards. For example, if I take it, I call it Haraman's body, the 8 Merkavs together because he discovered it. So how many protrusions does it have? 8. And there are 8 Merkavs. And if you look at human DNA, it is made up of 2 strands. Much like we have 2 pyramids that we put together. Binary code. Dad's DNA. What does our DNA use as its main feature? 4 letters. A, C, T, G. What does one pyramid use? 4 walls. So there's the mirroring again. If you look at Haraman's object, it has 64 pyramids inside. Humans have 64 codons in their DNA, characteristic particles where information is stored. It is constantly mirrored. For example, if you take the energy systems, go to Tibet. The lamas who can heal using their secret procedures and tools have tools called doryes. Bar, 4 spokes on one side, 4 spokes on the other. And depending on how they grasp it, what mantra they say, they will either drain the energy or add it according to what the patient needs, because they know how to work with that energy tool. 4 elements on one side and the opposite 4 elements on the other. Like the Merkava, the principle is still the same. 1 axis, 4 elements, 4 elements. If you look at the solar system, our solar system is absolutely unique. So our system is beautiful. Intelligence simply participated in the creation of our solar system, our life. And if you look at our solar system in terms of symbolism or principles, it's one central sun connecting all the planets, and four in a row of small rocky planets, and four in a row of opposite planets, large gassy ones. So 1, 4, opposite 4. That principle is embodied in some form based on that fractality. And what happened to me in my life is that, in other words, maybe I'll go back to the essentials if I had the Merkaba now, that we're always talking about pyramids that have a triangular base. But people know that pyramids with a square base, that they act really. So if I put a string or a thread here today, and I started stretching the thread here between these points, like this, you will see it beautifully on our website. If here those threads were stretched, which you will see absolutely precisely and disassembled on our website. So there, we will see that inside the Merkaba, there are 5-sided pyramids, always in pairs. There are 6 5-sided pyramids. They are always there in 3 axes, and their bases are to each other. Square base with the tips apart in one axis, in the second axis, in the third axis, so that any Merkaba that is composed of triangular walls automatically has in it the classic pyramids with a square base. And it even contains a third element. We also have that in the videos, and that is hexagons. And in nature, it turns out that hexagons work miraculously, because bees use them for their hexagonal houses and so on. Perhaps it is precisely because there are 3 elements, tetrahedral pyramids, that is, from triangles themselves, pentahedral pyramids, those with a square base, plus hexagons, are at the root, at the source of the prescription, on the basis of which then arises our perception, the impression of space-time. In other words, at the root of creation of those energy processes is something that is not material, but has some kind of structure, mathematical, thought, hence the sacred geometry. And it works with the energy process, so that when we embody this fractality, that is, this knowledge, these principles, this sacredness, this geometry, this mathematics, it doesn't matter what we call it, into something material, which is what our ancestors did in those megalithic buildings, the pyramids, spirals, and so on, further. This does not have to be made of matter. A lady was just buying it yesterday, and she asked me about something specific, and I answered her and told her that you basically don't need it. You can easily think about it, and it will still be the same principle. But this is a subject that will help you to think about it better, precisely, purposefully, and so on. That matter is not needed for that. It is still awareness in the process, as Professor Rack says, is the result of the observation. So the way we set that attention, that's the response we get at that level. So, what actually happened to me and my colleague, today I already perceive it as having happened, that somehow it passed us by. Back then, when we were creating it, I couldn't have accepted that something was flowing through us. I was just happy with it, and we did what we wanted and had fun. It actually came about that I, as a representative of the Seraphin Center, at that time he was a colleague for me, or a colleague. For me, at that time, he was one of the suppliers whom I considered a brilliant creator. He makes, for example, energy cups, carafes, vitalizers, water, candles, just absolutely brilliant stuff. And I always thought of him as such. So this is an elf cup, right? It's an elf. It's a little weird. It's got crystals down there. Here it's got feathers. We talked about it last time in that talk about cosmic numerology. So today you made a fuss about it, saying that you like it. The lightness of being. It must be beautiful to drink from it. So I brought it for you, just like that. I mean, the fellow who makes this, I thought he was a genius for years, and I was shocked when one day he rang the bell at our Seraphim Center, sat down across from me and said, "I'd like to develop something with you." So I was completely staring. When he told me what his intention actually was, to use a wonderful mixture that a Hindu guru had meditated on. The mixture today is called carbometham. The Swiss patented it. It's not cheap. Waldorf schools are built from it today because this mixture wonderfully vitalizes living cells as well as plants, man, and so on. It is specially enriched carbon with various substances of the 5 elements, plus other rare elements. In the end, it vitalizes the cells, and he wanted to make something out of it. Gradually, through mutual creativity or ideas, we developed the idea of creating our own mixture, which, among other things, will contain carbometham. And to turn our mixture into something that will reduce people's fatigue, improve their mood, simply as a general feeling. For example, tired legs somewhere in the office. A person puts his feet on it and he might feel a little better. That was our idea to try to make this. What I'm actually going to take in my hands now weighs 5.5 kilos. So this weighs 5.5 kilos, and 40% of this mass, or 2.2 kilos, is pure crystalline crystal. Now, imagine a crystal. This is ground crystal material. Yes, tiny bits. So carbon plus silicon together. The carbon I will say at the end, because now I will mention the largest volumes. The largest volume, almost half, 40%, is pure crystalline crystal. Another large part of the volume is another mineral, and that is barite. This is the mineral that quantum physicists use. Nuclear power plants are built from it. When you go to the hospital for an X-ray, or when people go there, the walls are painted with barite. This is ground into a paste. The walls are painted with it. And this mineral works wonders. It can eliminate high-frequency radiation in space. It disappears from that space. In other words, it cleans the space from high-frequency radiation. But no one knows how it does it. Everyone believes it is at the quantum level. Apparently, it's sending it to other levels because the radiation is disappearing. Then we put a carb meter in there. Just everything we think is the best. So we put a crystal in there, we put a bunch of barite in there, we put a carbometer in there, and we put monoatomic gold and monoatomic platinum in that mixture. Because gold works with the aura of living beings. That is why gold is called aurum. Platina works with the individual layers of bodies. So we put that in, plus other elements and substances. Then we thought about what to make of it, and what form to give it and those people or to us, so that the body can touch it. And so we wanted to create some form that would be an information database. There will be an information matrix, where the highest knowledge that we have discovered in our lifetime will be inserted, such as golden sections, Fibonacci curves, spirals, the golden angle, and so on, various sequences, what nature is built on, plus knowledge of the gate between non-matter and matter, 144 pyramids, hexagons, and so on. Therefore, there are about 144 pyramidal hexagons or hexagonal pyramids. That's why the flower of life is here. Symbol of the flower of life. Because if you imagine that one Merkaba and put 8 of them together, you have the so-called Harriman's body, and there are 64 of these protrusions or small pyramids. But it is not matter. This is something consciousness works with. So, for example, I would call it some kind of thought form or awareness, prescribed by God, or, for example, a pattern on which consciousness runs. But when it is supposed to create mass effects, for example, quantum effects, then we get to that bubble. That's the soap bubble that forms a sphere due to force bonds. So if you now imagine that one Harriman body, that it has 64 pyramids, and each of those pyramids is giving the task of radiating a sphere, i.e. a spherical surface around it, then suddenly there are not 64 pyramids, but 64 spheres. And if you look at how those pyramids turned into 64 spheres, you suddenly see a cube. 4 balls times 4 balls times 4 balls. That is a cube made of 4 by 4 by 4 spheres. Because if I put it like this, you can already see the cube is there, and when the balls are placed there, they permeate each other. And if you turn the cube of the 64 spheres spatially, like with the tip towards you, let's say it's a cube, I'll now turn it towards you, so now you see the cube of 64 spheres turned with its tip towards you, and suddenly you'll see a hexagonal outline. And if you look through those balls, you will see the flower of life. And that emanation from that immaterial prescription, which produces those material effects. That's why the name is absolutely perfect. Flower of life. Because it blossoms from some information. When you plant a seed, there is information. So grow something real out of it. And here, in that system, that Harriman body, the real effect of that material energy manifestation actually blossoms. So this knowledge and many others that we don't have time to discuss here, we tried to put all that knowledge into shape. The result is what we call a flow disk. It has been on sale for 2 years now. During that time, hundreds of flow discs were sold. They are monochromatic, in 9 colors. This is one of the colors, and they are edited. We used to edit them a lot, then we had to stop. It was exhausting for us, or the colleagues editing it. And this is solar, a completely new pattern or a new model. And they are edited. They are citrines, 24-karat gold, mother of pearl, carnelian, and only real materials are used, and only the highest quality, meaning gold, silver, platinum, and so forth. And these objects, flow disks, suddenly began to manifest themselves somehow in their action. We found this out based on user feedback. Of course, we tested it. We ourselves have some experiences with this, but some of them are of such a type that it is not suitable to share them publicly, because either some people would not believe me, or they would say, well, that's just your perception. But if I take people's reactions, I think that today it serves as the most illustrative example of what it actually means when a person works with that sacred geometry and reality. That is, put it under the bed, put it in the living room, put a flower on it, put a water bottle on it, and so on. And because my colleague's name is Richard Sinchuk, he has a company called Via Human. He created the products here, and we are at the Seraphim Center together. This project is called Human Relax. This means that people can relax in some form, and the specific product of the Human Relax project is Flow Disk. So something, a portal, that has something to do with the flow of energy. And the first thing we did as technical guys was to give it to different companies for measurement, testing all kinds of things. A company that can measure auras, chakras, and so on. And today, on the Flow Disk website, you can find real measurements. That means I will now say, for example, the most fantastic measurement for me, or one of the most fantastic. Let's say we take a Wi-Fi router. You turn it on. Today's common Wi-Fi router works at, say, 5 gigahertz. That means the energy of that router is oscillating like that 5 billion times a second and going through the concrete wall, the cell of a person, and it is now working out through that cell. So if you take that router, turn it on, take a meter, measure the radiation from the router in space, then you have some value. You put the flow disk on the table here, and you will see that on the meter, the value of the radiation in the space will decrease by 90% on average. 90% will disappear. You will erase it with an object. This has no explanation. That's why, for example, that Professor Ruck, who is most concerned with the scalar field today, because he discovered that the curves along which the energy flows are absolutely crucial, hence the sacred geometry. Because she creates a flow of energy, or what we then call energy flow. So when we then create an object that forces those energies to flow in a certain geometry, certain effects happen. So, for example, Victor Schauberger, who observed water and fish in this way, discovered that when energy, such as water and air, heat flows along certain curves, forces from subtle reality that are involved in that gross process. And they can even outweigh the gross material forces in the gross material process. So, for example, the alpine trout, as observed by Schauberger when sailing against the falling water, finds the right place, just stands up and without moving its body goes up against the current of water. And the largest height difference that has been recorded is 6 meters. And consider the kinetic energy of water falling from 6 meters. And the little fish will climb up without moving, because the flowing curve can involve the subtle forces, and they overcome and pull up with a certain force. So the subtle forces that engage through a form are huge ones, and we don't know they are unsuspected. What would get outside of gravity? The trout? I think that body would pull him down. He doesn't have enough energy to probably climb over 6 meters. That's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead. Let's move on. There is, for example, an illustrative example where you take a spiral, make it, for an example, out of wood or metal. If it has a certain shape, you turn on the water tap, you actually have a stream of water there. It falls down, and you down maybe 2 meters from the ground, and you just insert a spiral into the rod of that water, and it goes against the current to that faucet, because as the water flows around the spiral, the buoyant forces are involved, pulling it up. It's about the direction of the energy flows. And the forces it can invoke are already so-called against physical knowledge. They may go in the opposite direction completely. We actually do not know on what basis the high-frequency energy disappears, or where it disappears, if it disappears at the subtle level. But it disappears from the plane where it harms our living cells. And I don't know of any other item that can clean a space with 90%. I just don't know. What is the radius of this disk? Again, how do we set it up? Let's say that maybe he could manage to clean the whole house from those negative radiations. This is a very complicated question that I can't really answer quickly, and that's because you actually already determined the question. What is the reach? Clearly, but the information has no reach. Information view. Okay, but it's stronger in some space of meters, and then it gets weaker, right? This does not span the entire planet. Okay, I understand, but it works on an infinite number of levels, so each of those planes has a different reach. So we're going to talk about how it works with that consciousness, how it works with your aura. Then it doesn't really matter if you go 200 kilometers away or if you are right next to it. Clearly, if we're talking about radiation from the router, what you want to see on your meter, then the range already plays a role there. So we'll add a range to it so it can handle the whole neighborhood, including the garden and beyond. I think that's the greatest result achieved when you don't deal with it in your mind. When you're actually playing, you're like a child playing. For example, I have observed it absolutely clearly that animals, children in general, can run up, lie down on it, sleep on it, and are happy. I have a friend who is a Feng Shui lecturer. She got a flow disc from me. She put it under her bed. From the moment she has it under her bed, because she lives in the forest, she has animals there. She says she sleeps less. She is less tired. Blah, blah, blah. But she can't move because all the animals find her on the duvet, on the bed, and then she can't move because they're lying on top of that flow disc. And this is a very frequent accompanying phenomenon, that dogs and cats live or sleep on it. I am also asking you, when I stepped on it, how much it weighs, i.e. the carrying capacity, because I was afraid that it might crack under me. So we tested it. If you put it on 2 bricks, for example, so it's just like, can a 100-pound person step on it? He can jump 170 kilos on it. It's been tested. A colleague of mine tried. So 2 people can stand on it. Yes. And when it's on a mat, it's unlimited. And even the first pieces we produced, a colleague said that it could withstand falling on concrete, on the ground. So we tested it, broke it, threw it on concrete, found out what it really could withstand. So even, at least in our tests, which was the biggest problem in the first tests, when it fell on the surface, it never cracked there. It cracked for us when it fell on the edge. So today it will last after that strengthening and the fall on concrete. So a 100-kilo person can step on it and it's not a problem. It's basically stronger than high-strength cement or some high-strength concrete. So its strength is really high. Where did we end up? That you can put it under the bed, that you can sleep and lie on it. Yes, you can actually do anything with it. Even massage? Even for people who have spinal pain? Yes, I'll get to that. Another thing, here the profile of the hexagons has variable angles. So here, it stings more, here, less. So when a person massages his feet on it, he can actually find a place that is just pleasant, either stinging or not stinging, and so on. And when we are talking about the joints or pain or some health changes, I have to say that today, based on the experiences we get from people, they are spread out completely evenly on all levels. On a physical level, on a psychological level, on a spiritual level, on the level of how that person perceives the world. The very last reaction that came to me is from a lady who, since having it, says, I have a compulsive setting to tell the truth, but I can't help but tell the truth, and it's unpleasant for those around me, and so on. For everyone, it manifests itself with a subtle increase in the vibrations of the body's environment. For example, a man who bought it for his wife actually wanted to use it sometimes, so for the first 14 days, he put flowers on it, which he had not been able to do for several years. Those flowers. Within 14 days, the flowers grew and grew, and today he says that they are doing extremely well, that they are amazing. So maybe 14 days was enough for those flowers. And if I go back to the measurable effects, for example, we had the molecular structure of the water that comes into contact with the flow disk measured in a Swiss laboratory, so they could send us the conditions, what we should do with the water, how many hours it should take, and so on further, whether the samples should be marked somehow. So that's what we did. We sent it to the laboratory in Switzerland, and the results they sent us almost knocked me off my chair, because the water that stood for 3 hours on the flow disk created such a perfect crystal based on the molecular arrangement that it could be more perfect than could be seen on our website. The photos are shown there. But the reason why I fell off my chair, that's what I was hoping for, is that the water that stood on the Wi-Fi router turned on, directly on it, for example, on the center of the glow, and from that router 3.5 meters away on the ground, was the flow disk. We tested the ranges, so it was 3.5 meters away. So the water, without the laboratory knowing it, so the water, which stood so close to the flow disk, and then switched on the Wi-Fi router, so it makes beautiful crystals. A company that can measure aura and chakras, and did one of the first flow disk tests for us, had to stop it and tested the person only after 11 days. That person had the task of being in contact with the flow disk 3 times a day for 15 minutes. And in those 11 days, those chakras expanded by 50%, which is a huge leap. That person is already changing. In other words, if someone is interested in seeing videos of the measurement directly, or tables of measured values, or photos of crystals and so on, they can go to humanrelax.com or centrumseraphin.cz. Not that someone said something, but also nature measured, as measured directly in reality. And what I think is perhaps the most important thing, with the information about how to use the sacred geometry, we have this separation of user experience, and that's the most interesting thing, because there are dozens and dozens of experiences. Each is such a different caliber that it can be seen that it works. As we are multispectral beings, so it works on those multispectral levels. What does anyone need? For example, I have a colleague, he's my friend, who is, I call him personally, a muggle, because he doesn't really like those things, but he likes to talk about them, although he doesn't live it. And we may have a long conversation together, and he asks me at the end of the conversation, well, you think that the soul exists as a fact? So it's like I don't know what to do at that moment, but he's having fun. He's having fun with it. And this person, who basically never took these things seriously, so the moment I asked him, because he lives in the wild, he has chickens, so I asked him to do testing on the chickens too, because we do it on everything possible. We have to try real results from different sides. That's how we found out with the hens. When I know it hangs on the wall in the chicken coop, they look at it from the perch. They sure like it that way. So we gave it to them, and now a long-term measurement is taking place, and I want it to last a year, the measurement, so after a few months. Are they definitely happy and laying good eggs? Well, you'll laugh at what happened. Come on, tell me. For about 3 or 4 months, we measured them without a flow disc, so that we would know how much they would lay, how much the eggs weigh, blah, blah, blah. Then we hung it up there and wondered if anything would change or not. So far, it's been running for a long time. So I want to wait a year. However, the first results are these. Egg weight increased by 12%. 12.22%. So it's like strange why the eggs are suddenly over 10% heavier. But most importantly, on the property where the friend lives, he has a big guard dog. It's a Central Asian, like a huge 70-kilogram beast, and it lives there in symbiosis with those hens. But since the flow disc is in the chicken coop, he never got there because it's through the door, it's through the chicken coop. So he suddenly started breaking in there, learning how to open the door, and he goes in there to eat the eggs. He didn't until then, not until the flow disc was there. So for me it's very interesting because the animals react very interestingly to it. Maybe I might mention a lady who has a British blue, or what is it called? A British blue? Yeah, blue Brit. Well, they are a bit shy, and they don't like a lot of cuddling and caressing. And she says, I have a cat exactly like that, and it's been 6 years already. Then I bought a flow disc, and since we have it, the cat lives on it. And when I go to meditate and sit on it, that cat can't get enough of the touch of that lady, that owner. When it's on a flow disc, it lets itself be stroked and so on. So the changes can be seen well on those animals. Well, I'll tell my friend's story. So I gave him the chicken flow disc to put in the chicken coop, and I told him it was wrapped, and I told him, it's not for you, don't unwrap it. Wait for me to measure. So, of course, he unwrapped it, put it under his bed right away. He took it from the chickens, didn't he? He took it from the chickens. He should have waited. He should have put it in there a month or so. Yeah, but he shoved it under the bed. And he woke up in the morning. I didn't know he had unwrapped it. I didn't know he was going to put it under his bed. When I say calm down, it's very strong. Don't put it under the bed right away. Yeah, first slowly get used to it. Anyway, he immediately pushed it under his bed. He woke up in the morning with an incredible back pain and just couldn't move right away. And then he thought he was going to have to call an ambulance, because a year ago he had a disc blown out and he, living alone, was just realistically thinking about calling an ambulance. But somehow he managed. He survived that day. The next day again. So he woke up again with the same back pain. He couldn't even move. And at that moment he thought, well, I actually have that flow disc under my bed. So he called me and says, look, my back hurts so much that I can't move. And I told him, sure, it could be. Give it away. So he put it away, and he put it in the living room. So the third night, he sleeps without it under the bed. He woke up in the morning. A flood of phone calls. He said, I have to thank you. Nothing hurts at all, but nothing at all. I'm like a young man. And he's 72. So he already has something behind him in terms of the building and his problems. And he says, I'm like a young man. It doesn't hurt at all. I work all day today with a spade, with a shovel in the garden, and so on. By the way, that situation continues to this day. And I don't know what happened at all, because he is also materialistically based. Well, but because he started to believe it, he put it next to his bed the next night, and he put his hand on it like that, and slept because he had arthritis there. And as he already works manually, it hurt him. He woke up in the morning with another flood of phone calls to me and said, you won't believe it. It doesn't hurt at all. But the strange thing is, the other hand that I didn't have the disc on doesn't hurt either. And he says, do you think it could be the flow disc? I said, well, it can be, but I don't understand why it would work for you that way. In other words, something completely different happens with everyone. But at least we found out that the potential is really there. It's true, his back hurt a lot for 2 days, so some kind of wave went through there, whether it's cleansing or getting rid of it, unblocking. Yes, this happens, let's say in 50% of the cases. That is the beginning, it's cleaning, the unblocking. But then it starts quite abruptly, straight away, and in the second phase, already the improvement is significant. So, just to give you an idea, a lady who lives with a 15-year-old grandson who is constantly sitting on the computer and says that since we have it at home, he comes to talk to us about what we dreamed, what he saw. More is shared with us and so on. And that fits exactly into the scheme or the experiences that I see in those people, that in the long term, for example, after 3/4 of a year, after a year, in the household where this occurs, the atmosphere seems to soften, to improve. Those people treat each other better, share more time with each other. When they quarrel, somehow they soften it, or apologize to each other, and so on. It's as if the vibration is building up and gradually manifesting itself to everyone, regardless of who bought it. Of course, it raises the vibration. Maybe I don't have that ability, but among those experiences that I don't share much publicly, here I think you will understand. So I've had several people tell me that they see a light network that creates flow disks within that, where they are, like in the Republic. They are also outside the Republic, but that they can directly see the network. And one lady, who with the flow disk is Aqua in particular, travels around the country and tries to revive power places that today would be good for people to use, that are forgotten or devastated in some way. They use a flow disk for this. But recently, she got back to me saying the network sent her a message. The flow disk network light, and the message is, for each individual, his flow disk works as it should, as the portal some energy, but we want the whole network and offer each individual user to ask the whole network to participate through his own portal on that his process, but that it also works as a network. And these are the things I can't even measure or see, but it comes from people as some sort of feedback. So for me, or if I had to say the most to someone about it, I'd say, hey, read the user experience, because there you'll see things that even I don't know. It didn't even get through to me, but it did get through to some other people who work with it. So for me, this is an illustrative example of a real object or portal which is actually not just about some matter. It is about the thought process, about the cosmic codes, the processes of consciousness, because consciousness participates in that time-space in the perception of quantum effects, and apparently some essential or key information passed through us, which thanks to the fractality, how the universe hears and resonates with each other with yourself, so when something big is built from the same information. For example, even a large pyramid, if it has the right parameters, is still in resonance with that thought prescription. Thanks to that, the energy processes that are behind the line of sight sight apparently take place there. So they are like a miracle for us. And this is something that I already call for myself today as a discovery of a new age. We can research it now, like Professor Rack. Another study is going on. Now we are going to measure how it cleanses the body of heavy metals. For example, we recently had a sticker that bears the same relief measured. If the sticker does something or not, because what is this? That's information. Although it is also material, it is an object, but above all, it is information. The sticker is also information. When we made the same sticker and tested it on ourselves, for example, on my colleague who edits the flow disks, where he is rather sensitive to it, he has a gift for it. So we all stuck it on some important place. So on mobile telephones, on laptops, and so on. And he stuck it on his cell phone and found that suddenly he could talk on the phone for maybe half an hour and not get a headache. He could never call like that, 2 or 3 minutes at most, then he would get a headache. And suddenly he found that the sticker somehow made his headache go away. That made us test it in different ways, whether it was measuring chakras, aura, and so on. And the results that we are gradually getting now are absolutely incredible. And one wonders how a sticker can cause this. But it is the informational address. Exactly. Just like the flowers of life. People stick to their calculators and mobile phones. And this is even more amplified by the fact that it is not only about the flower of life. This was a flow disk that was yours. You saw this one. You want this one. So fine, you'll have this one. Why don't you want it? Why do you want it? You like it. It fits you. But for me, when people ask us if it's monochromatic or edited, I like to tell people that they all have the same power. It doesn't matter at all. You like citrine, I understand. But as for the information matrix, it's all the same. As for the composition of the material, it too is the same. In other words, we are basically doing all the measurements we do on a single color, so that no one can think that it is due to the adjustments. It's just the power is the same. It's just that the power is the same. The power that happens to that person in life is exactly the same. In other words, my point today was that you actually said that the transformation is taking place. One part of the transformation may be how to use the deeper knowledge of the interface between non-matter and matter in a way that does not harm anyone else. Because it is stronger than, for example, an atomic bomb, because the energy is still being created from it, so it is even stronger. So it really depends on who is trying to work with it. But if we embody it in something that serves for personal development, so that that person's vibrations, their body, their joints, their purification from heavy metals, for example, it ionizes the air, this material, so negative ions are created for you. So if it works within that person's personal space and personal development, then we think or hope that it's the right use of that knowledge. And we are completely happy that everyone can try it for real. And it's something that can really be grasped. It's a once-in-a-lifetime investment. It even recently occurred to me that when people make something, the products usually do not outlive the person. You will also throw away the washing machine in less than 20 years, having to buy a new one. We are simply a consumer society. But to make something today that will last into the next household for generations, I can't imagine that someone will buy it and the next generation will throw it in the dumpster. I don't think so. It is a stone, it's a mineral, it's a crystal, it's noble materials, it looks nice, it can be used for anything. So for me, everything is coming together in such a way that I think that this is one of the other things of the new era, of the transformational one, which has the gift of actually bringing something to this person. I would like to thank you for the enormous supply of information. I thank you. Enrichment for us all, and I'm really looking forward to the next time. And also, please, this ideal, if, for example, someone comes to you and chooses a disc that appeals to them, or just browse the internet, you just have so much of it there. Yes, maybe one interesting thing. I personally consider this subject to be only half of the flow disk. The other half, because it's called flow disk, the other half of this flow disk is special videos we've created, absolutely the highest professional level. They contain, for example, sounds that you choose that you want to affect your alpha, beta, delta, and theta levels. They contain information that is meant for reason, because at a subconscious level, our cells know how those energies work, but our reason needs to talk about it. For example, those videos show the basic cosmic principle of energy. So it pays to watch it at least a few times, maybe review it several times over the course of a few years, because that way we also supply the mind with the key information about the energy process, about the sacred geometry. And then they, whether with the flow disk or in life in general, then work on a deeper level. It's because we were able to deliver that essential information. How nature works, how we are really built. So if someone, even if they are not interested in the flow disk, wanders into those sites, whether humanrelax.com or centrumserafin.cz, there is identical information, identical videos, so they can view the information in the videos there. We have about 10 of them there. There is audio, that is, for relaxation through sound, but with an image background. There is also image relaxation, where looking into those images is essential. There's a whole brainstorming video. There's just a lot of it, and it's all top-notch, made by the best people, and I'm totally happy about it. So it's already worth going there to see. When people come to the website, they like it or they dislike something, edited or unedited. And if they already have a simple option, I either just want to click or call and say what you would tell me about this or that. We will give our best to everyone. We are happy to provide what information we know about it. But it can be ordered classic as well. Good. Thank you very much. I thank you. Good luck to all, and to your work. I would like to wish all of you here, lady cameramen, you, and all the people who happen to hold out until now. So I wish you all joy in life.